They're simply there to cause trouble for everyone. They do not contribute in any sense of the word.
Because this is not the way the phenomenon was meant to be.
We would be much better off without them completely if they would just disappear, drop dead, whatever, I don't care.
What particularly upsets believers is the comparative ease with which a hoaxer can spread confusion simply by claiming to have made a formation.
All they have to do is whisper in the Croppies' ears that they made this one or that one, not have to show any evidence. And it simply whispers in the night, whispers in the dark.
It is the easiest thing in the world to stick your hand up and say, yes, I did that, and then leave it up to people such as myself to prove that they haven't done it.
They make our research more difficult, even if they've actually not committed the hoax, but go around saying they've done something when in fact they haven't.
I think there's much less human activity going on than many people would have us believe. And I guess it's that, rather than anybody actually out there doing it, which upsets me, is when people talk about this stuff without actually providing any evidence.
I have also fantasized with friends of taking this one fellow, and tying him up and throwing him into the canal and watching him float off into the night.
The thing is, we set up this black and white thing where it's either hoaxed or it's genuine, and if it's genuine, that implies it's some sort of unknown force, aliens or some aspect of the invisible world, and if it's not that, then it's hoaxed, and I think that's a completely wrong language to use.
So they're not hoaxers, they're circle makers. And from this stems the most curious paradox.
Circles researchers love the creations that we artists make, but on the other hand hate the idea that they're made by artists and not by some sort of paranormal entity.
In a tangled web of contradictions, believers despise the very people they claim do not actually exist. Simultaneously, they are willing to contemplate that people are responsible, but only if these people are being controlled by higher forces of some kind.
Let me start off by saying I believe that 90% of all the crop formations are man-made. That's not to say they are hoaxed, because if somebody is pulling the strings up there, they're pulling the strings perhaps on the right people.
It could be possible that a hoaxer on some level is channeling.
That is definitely, in my opinion, a part of this phenomenon, because if you give a great deal of attention to something, then in my understanding and experience, you establish a psychic link.
Then you could argue, yeah, maybe it takes people literally, and they find themselves going out there one night to create these patterns, and maybe they're working to some other agenda than their own that they don't know about.
It's quite possible without them even knowing it, because it's probably easy for some higher intelligence to get through to their small little brains.
Strange things are happening that human beings could not know about. There are so many examples, and I myself have had cases where I thought of a design and I didn't tell anybody, and suddenly there it is in a crop circle. Now, if that's a human-made crop circle, well, that human can't have read my mind, or did he? I don't know. But in any case, some sort of puppetry, I think, is going on here, where these human artists are doing things from some much grander design.
I do believe that they are quite impossible. The complexity would be quite impossible for them to have dreamt up themselves.
This paradoxical notion seems a mightily convenient escape clause for believers. But strangely, there may be some truth to it. After all, it's anyone's guess where circle makers get their ideas.
There are people who have indeed claimed that the patterns they set out to make when they leave the pub or wherever are not the patterns that finish up in the field. These patterns appear to be produced by some other interactive force. This is their words, it's not mine.
I don't know where it came from, but then you read afterwards in newspapers and magazines that it seems that there's a connection between what I drew that evening and what we were going to create in the fields with the Hopi Indians and Aborigine people. And it seems to me that it could be a connection between languages. But that mystifies me very much.
circle makers are generally rather caricatured in the minds of researchers, and as a consequence there's a certain amount of vitriol directed against circle makers.
The reason being the widely held misconception that circle makers are mindless morons trying to destroy the so-called genuine phenomenon. Their motivations are not so simplistic, and for many of them it has become compulsive.
It's given me the opportunity to interact with and experience something I can only describe as being supernatural or paranormal, which at the best of times is very exciting and exhilarating. Perhaps at the worst of times is quite unnerving and even frightening.
To me, it's all about, it's this weird, twisted, kind of wrangled thing about human potential.
I started making circles primarily as an experiment to find out what's humanly possible. What can be done in a field within 4 hours with 3 other people.
When I first heard of the phenomenon, I mean, I couldn't believe that people was responsible, and I was sort of prepared to accept, yes, the aliens are here, this is it, this is the message. And then when I'd sort of sat down and worked out various techniques as to how these formations could be made, and then drew them on paper, I think it was then the challenge to replicate what I drew on paper in the field.
I make circles because I'm an artist, and I regard circle making as part of my artwork.
It fits the complete criteria of art, in the sense that art is supposed to fill people with experience.
Being circular, and UFOs were circular, we just wanted people to imagine, just to believe the next morning that, my God, something's landed here during the night.
And I think quite quickly it becomes compulsive. You see people's reactions to what you do, and they're very unexpected reactions. People claim to be healed in our formations. People claim to have spiritual experiences in our formations.
It is very addictive doing it, especially if you're experiencing things which are beyond conventional science, or science as we know it. I would consider myself an architect of temporary sacred sites.
Originally, my interest was in finding out who was making circles. I decided that it was most probably people. It seemed sensible at the time to try it oneself. Once that stage had been gotten over, it became quite compulsive. It became more to do with the creative compulsion.
Time after time when I've been in the field in the rain for 5 hours, getting cold and wet, and I keep telling myself that's my last time, but there's something that motivates me to continue doing it. I think I'm just obsessed with the phenomena.
Several questions arise. Are they in it for the publicity?
I suppose so, yes. Yes.
I think we crave publicity for our formations. I don't think we personally crave publicity. Sure, we all have egos, and sure, it's quite nice to sit in front of a camera.
I don't crave publicity, but I think it's an integral part of the crop circle phenomena. Not perhaps the publicity of the people behind it, but the publicity of the circles themselves is very important.
I think we all want our 15 minutes of fame, but no, I'm not really driven to be famous from it or to make any money, really. It's a very personal thing.
The more publicity we got with the media and newspapers and things, it egged us on even more.
I don't particularly crave publicity for myself, but I do want my work to be seen in a public context and interact in a public way with large numbers of people.
Or is circle making just a big joke? The glee of pulling the wool over people's eyes?
No, certainly not.
Sure, we all have a little snicker now and then.
If you see people laying on their backs in a circle, joining hands and doing a dance around, to me that was incredibly funny when I first heard of it. But after a while,